Hey guys, welcome back. Thought I'd pause real quick and point out that I know I've made a bunch of these bottle opener videos as shorts on YouTube or on my Instagram, but I've never actually walked through it. And then full disclosure, I had the COVID vaccine by Johnson & Johnson on Friday, so it's a one shot. And Saturday, it really knocked me out. I was out of commission. So no time this past weekend to do a big project. This was on my agenda to do, so I thought I'd video it and show the process and walk through it this time, explaining what I do and why I do it. So I hope you enjoy. This is what's left of the bottle opener that I gifted my son on his 21st birthday. It was made with some stabilized Buckeye Burl and resin. It fell off the countertop at his place a few weeks back and it snapped. And the Buckeye, I think because it was stabilized, didn't have much give or flexibility, so it was more plastic-like. Anyways, I wasn't planning on recording this like I mentioned, so I didn't record the pouring of the resin or that process. Probably do that in a different video. But this is some Chechen Burl. It's a Burl out of South America. I hadn't heard about it until a few years back, but I get it from Exotic Wood Zone. Just got gorgeous grain and figure. It's paired with some Illuminate Clear Slow and then some white mica powder in the middle. If you follow me on Instagram, you've seen this kind of look before. It tends to be my go-to whenever I'm using Chechen. I promise I won't talk all the way through the video, but I figure I'd tell you the story while you watch me trim off the excess pieces and square up this blank. One of my biggest fears is probably the bandsaw. You'll notice I always use push sticks. I just have this fear of cutting myself with it to the point where I actually have dreams about it. So one time I was on a plane, probably a couple years ago, traveling for business, and I fell asleep with my arms crossed. And as I was sleeping, I dreamt that I got my finger caught in the bandsaw. So in my dream, I jerked my hands back, but in real life, I actually did jerk my hands back and I elbowed the guy sitting next to me square in the chest. And all I could do was look at him and say, I'm sorry. I couldn't explain because I didn't think you'd understand. And then I just closed my eyes and pretended to go back to sleep. I'm being pretty aggressive with these initial cuts. I'm just trying to knock off those corners and get it rounded out. When you're aggressive with resin, you do get a lot of chip out, so you see here in a bit it'll stop and you can get a glimpse at what that looks like. I'll show later on the different techniques I use to make clean passes when you're turning resin though. Here I want to clean up the end where that's going to meet with the hardware for the bottle opener. Looking to make a little concave so that when that hardware seats up against the handle, it's nice and flush. It's a firm fit. When you look at it from the side, there's no gaps. And what I'll typically do here is use a straight edge and look to make sure that it's got enough concave to where it's going to fit cleanly. I use these knurled inserts. I get them from Stainless Steel Bottle Stoppers, the same company that produces the bottle opener itself. Could go the other way and then drill it out and tap it for the right threads. I've done that. It works. There's nothing wrong with it. I do think that the wood has a tendency to wear away in some cases. It's not as secure as this method. And if you're in production mode, you can crank these out. They're relatively inexpensive and it just makes it super efficient. I drill just slightly deeper than the insert itself, so it's recessed, and that's a 1/4 inch Forstner bit. After I drill it out, I always test fit it to make sure that it sits recessed below the surface. I have not paid attention before and it's been proud, which is not a good situation to be in after you've glued it in. I tend to use the medium CA glue. You could also use epoxy, the 5-minute epoxy if that works for you. CA just seems to be the one that works for me. Plus I can spray it with some activator and it makes the process go faster. Another trick I picked up over the years is to use the tailstock to press that insert in. Just make sure that it seats cleanly and it goes in perfectly even. The stainless steel bottle stopper's mandrel has a built-in bush, and you'll see that here in a second. But I like to do a little bevel on the end of my handle, something for your thumb to rest against. So I'll put that hardware in, I'll mark it, and that's just a guide for me so I know how deep I can turn. Here's the mandrel I mentioned earlier. Real quick and convenient, especially if you're doing production work. You could do a Jacob's chuck with a threaded rod that matches the insert. This is just what I found to be the easiest for me. Not on the stainless steel bottle stopper's payroll, just a product I actually like and enjoy using. As you can see, I wasn't being very delicate with my cuts, getting a lot of chip out there. But here in a second, I'm going to show you the different processes or the tools that I've used to get real clean cuts with resin. I'm going to start off with the negative rake cutter on the Easy Wood Tools full-size set. Can't really tell from the angle of the video, but I'm actually holding this parallel, and it's just really straight and simple. You go at it dead on and you get those nice streams. It's a nice clean even cut, not much chip out there at all, actually none. This one is a traditional carbide. It was actually from the first set of carbide tools that I got when I got into wood turning. So it's their mini set, but it's a traditional carbide cutter. If you put it up on its side a little bit, maybe not quite a 45-degree angle, and you come at the wood that way, you'll get nice clean ribbons. If you go straight at it with that tool, you do get some chatter and you get some chip out. But over the years I learned that if you put it just slightly up on its side and angle it, you're really doing what would be a shear cut with a traditional tool. And then here's that shear cut with a traditional, I'm using the bowl gouge here. I haven't mastered a real clean cut with resin doing a push cut, but those shear cuts seem to work pretty well for me. On the back of the handle, I'm going to match a similar profile to the front of the handle, if you will. I like that nice beveled, clean look there. You'll notice that I keep the tailstock in place though, even when I'm going to get into putting a finish on it here in a minute. I just leave that tailstock up and in place as long as possible. I found through trial and error that once you remove that over that span of that spindle, it will get a wobble eventually, and then applying a finish or doing any kind of sanding or finish work, it just gives you a real uneven finish. So I leave that tailstock up until the very last minute. I've edited out most of the sanding, you're welcome. But I started at 180, I'm up to 400 now, applying some myelin sanding sealer. Once it cures and I'll edit out the wait time there, I'll hit it with 600 and then I'll do a CA finish. I found that if I put the sanding sealer on before I do a CA finish, it keeps the wood from drinking as much CA as it normally would if it was just raw. Now I'm going to apply a CA finish. I did find out the hard way that I'm pretty allergic to CA fumes, so I've got that dust collector running to pull those fumes away. I'm wearing a chemical filtration mask, the whole 9 yards. I usually start off with a couple layers of thin, just to seal up the wood, and then I'll move over to some medium. Sometimes I alternate between a layer of medium and then another layer of thin and then back and forth. It just depends on what kind of mood I'm in that day. But I'll fast forward through it here so it's not boring, but I typically leave the lathe running while that glue is curing before I put on the next layer, with my ultimate goal of just getting a nice, smooth, even surface across the whole piece. I personally don't have any hard fast rules about how many layers I apply. I think on average I probably end up with 5 or 6 different layers. I feel like the deeper that CA finish is, it just gives it that much more luster when you buff it up at the end. In my experience, it doesn't matter how delicate I was about applying the finish. Once it cures, I always see some of the application marks from the paper towel. So as the last step, typically what I'll do is I'll knock back a little bit with some steel wool, and then I'll apply one more layer of thin CA, and that just gives me a nice clean surface before I start wet sanding. After the CA glue fully cures, I'll wet sand. I use the micro mesh pads. A lot of people will go through all the grits of the micro mesh. I tend to just go through the first 5. Call me lazy, but I think it starts out at 1500, and then after the 5th one it's at 3600 grit. I edit it out here because it's just boring to watch. But after I've wet sanded, what I'll typically do is use a polishing compound. In the past I've used things like Meguiar's. Get it at an auto supply place. It's what they use to polish headlights with, but there's lots on the market. This was a product that a company gave me that they're currently testing right now, so I'm not going to show who it is, but it works like all the other polishing compounds. It gives a nice clean finish, a nice shine when it's done. After the majority of the handle has been finished, now I'm just going to whittle away at that last little bit and get rid of that nub. This is where things could go wrong. A catch and it'll get snatched off the lathe and break in half. Ask me how I know. So I'm just going to be real delicate here. I'm going to whittle away at this, and then I'm going to go through the same process that I did on the majority of the handle. I'm going to edit a bit of it out though because it'll just be redundant. Typically after doing the polishing compound, I would consider this project done. It has a nice clear finish, it's super shiny, but because I'm doing the video I thought I'd go ahead and show the buffing process. Once I was exposed to buffing and actually pulled the trigger and bought a buffing setup, I was just amazed at the difference made in pieces, especially with resin. So what I'll do here is I'll just show real quick what I'll use. I typically start off with the Tripoli wheel and the Tripoli compound. Always keep that piece moving. Don't leave it in one place while you're buffing or you'll burnish the finish. But I'll start off with the Tripoli and then you'll see me move to the white diamond. I don't feel like in this case it gave it that much more of a finish because that polishing compound did really well. But it's just a good example for how to take your piece to the next level. Like I said, once I did it, I was just amazed by the differences, and I was kind of disappointed that I hadn't bought a buffing setup sooner. Well, that's it. That's the finished bottle opener handle. I'll throw up some glamour shots here at the end because the shop lights aren't all that great. Hopefully you learned something. If you did, give me a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, make sure you subscribe. And if you have any questions, just leave me a comment and I'll try to answer all of them. Appreciate you taking the time, and thanks for watching.